Yeah, we back. I'm gonna try to knock this video out as quick as possible. Now, I'm responding to a comment from a subscriber that came into my comment section and said this. Take a look up on the screen. It's really difficult to find information on Toussaint slave owner. He is one person I'd like to know more about. A video on the different slave owners in Haiti would be nice and their relationship with the citizens. I replied and I said this. According to Haitian historians, slave owners were demonic. According to European historians, slave owners were wise, generous, and industrious businessmen. He came back and he said this. Toussaint slave owner apparently had a good hand in his upbringing. I even read Toussaint protected him and got him on a boat. What is interesting about it is, I know for a fact there were Europeans who inherited slaves that were not brutal. At the same time, they did not question the institution. A good example is Napoleon's wife. At the bottom, I said this. I don't care to acknowledge the 1% when 99% were subhuman savages. I don't care for Toussaint's owner. The lifespan of a slave in Saint-Domingue was less than 36 months. Slave owners are subhuman savages, including Toussaint's owner. Now, today we're going to talk about the myth of the benevolent European planter, the myth of the benevolent, generous, wise, industrious European slave owner, human trafficker that the slaves loved and appreciated. Today we're going to talk about it, man. Let's get into it. Now, I think this topic is perfect timing because it falls right in line with the entire controversy going on right now surrounding Just Pearly Things, when she said that, oh, slavery wasn't so bad. In fact, the slaves appreciated the master. They looked at him as a father. A topic that I discuss on my channel on a frequent basis is the European narrative of history and how that is the accepted narrative that everybody apparently accepts and looks at it as the gospel. It is what it is. And part of the European narrative of history, besides the usual BS of, oh, we came and brought civilization to the uncivilized nations. It was the Africans selling slaves. The Europeans, we freed the slaves. We liberated the slaves. The third element of that trinity is the myth of the benevolent European planter. The myth of the benevolent, the generous, the wise, the paternal European plantation owner. Now, let's talk about it, man. One thing we got to understand. The myth of the benevolent slave owner is a falsehood that has been perpetuated by historians in an attempt to sanitize the historical record and paint slave owners in a more positive light. They place an emphasis on the 0.000.5% of halfway generous white men just to minimize the 99.999.5% that was engaged in all type of brutality and criminality on a daily basis. And another way they do this is by eliminating all the brutal accounts of what really happened. Now, luckily for me, shout out to my forefathers, man. Shout out to my ancestors who, right after the Haitian Revolution, they immediately began writing a whole bunch of books. They immediately wrote like a whole bunch of news articles and newspapers, and they started media company publications. And man, I'm telling you, I'm so happy. It was so many authors in the Haitian Revolutionary government that left direct written accounts before they passed away. So I know what really was going on them plantations, bruh. I know what really was going on. So I would never accept anybody come tell me about no benevolent slave owner, especially on the French colony of Saint-Domingue. Especially on the French colony of Saint-Domingue, where the lifespan of an enslaved person didn't even last more than 3 years. Now, in the past, I've already made videos. Go to my playlist section. I've already made videos discussing the true brutality of what happened, especially on the French colony of Saint-Domingue. I'm not going to get into it today, but just thinking about it, bro. Just thinking about it. Just like, don't ever talk to me about no benevolent slave owner, bro. Are you kidding me, bro? I'll forever have rage in my heart for the literature that I've read about what really happened on the French colony of Saint-Domingue. And even by some off chance where there were some benevolent, generous white men who owned a bunch of slaves, guess what? They didn't stop the white men down the block across town from engaging in some of the most demonic acts of brutality the world has ever seen. Bro, stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Do not come into my comment section trying to tell me about no benevolent slave owner, man. Anyways, let's get back into it. You see, according to the European narrative of history, they don't really paint the slave owners as human traffickers and degenerates and pedophiles that they really were, right? They tell you that they provided them with decent living conditions and education, especially, and opportunities for advancement in society. But when we look at the reality, none of that is supported by any historical data. At the end of the day, man, using Toussaint Louverture as an example of having a benevolent slave owner, Toussaint Louverture held an elite position on the plantation, right? He wasn't in the field under the goddamn Caribbean heat in the sugarcane plantation. He didn't come from that. He was a motherfucking driver. He was a driver. He had an elite position, bro. He was a manager of a plantation. Like, why are you using him as an example? Why didn't you use Dessalines as an example? Why didn't you use Dessalines? As soon as Dessalines' mother arrived on the colony, she died. That's why he was taken in under the guardianship of Adabayatoya, who raised him as her own son. Why didn't you use Toussaint's wife? You know, Toussaint had a stepson. He had a stepson who was mixed race because Toussaint's wife, his slave owner, yeah, he was smashing that. Yeah, and he probably was smashing that when she was underage. I'm curious, why didn't you use Toussaint Louverture's wife as an example of having a benevolent, generous European slave owner? Why didn't you use King Henry Christophe? You see, Christophe, he wasn't born in Haiti. Christophe was born either in St. Kitts or Grenada. Christophe ended up running away from the plantation, hiding on a damn boat, didn't even know where the boat was gonna go, and ended up on the French colony of Saint-Domingue. And he was like, what, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old at the time? and the living conditions were so terrible that he decided to run away and just shack up on a goddamn boat headed to God knows where. And then he landed on the French colony of Saint-Domingue, and he never saw his family again. He never saw his mother again. He never saw his father again. Luckily for him, when he became general commander-in-chief of northern Haiti in the capital, he was able to secure the freedom of his sister, and she came to the colony. She came to Haiti and settled in, and she became a member of the royal court when he became king of Haiti. But he had to get in a position of power years down the line to make that happen before he ever saw his sisters again. During that whole time, during his adolescence, his early adulthood, and even most of the revolution, his sisters were still in bondage on the British colonies. So why didn't you use Christophe's sister, or Christophe, as an example of a European having a European benevolent slave owner? Why didn't you use Dessalines as an example himself, who was a slave until he was damn near 30 years old and suffered under such brutal conditions that it was said that he had permanent scars and marks all over his body? And apart from that, if you've been following my channel for a while, I already have in my playlist section a whole bunch of memoirs, a whole bunch of different written accounts, a whole bunch of newspaper articles that go into great detail about the brutality inflicted during the French colonial era in the colony of Saint-Domingue. And one thing that always just stuck out to me the most was just the brutality that was just inflicted upon the women and children especially. When it comes to men versus men, I can understand aggression among men. I can understand mutual combat among men. But when you just see so many written accounts of just the brutality inflicted upon the women and children, usually a population that doesn't really operate in aggression, that's something I can't respect, and that's not something I'm gonna ever accept somebody come and tell me about no benevolent slave owners, bro. It's like telling me about the benevolent drug dealer in the hood who gives turkeys away on Thanksgiving and shit. Nigga, don't tell me about that bullshit. Because even when you do get the off chance where you might find some benevolent slave owner, in many cases, that benevolent slave owner was only doing that to keep his slaves under control, keep them complacent, keep them compliant, make sure that the energy of rebellion doesn't animate the atmosphere. Similar to when they say, oh, the British, they stopped the slave trade. The British stopped the slave trade because they didn't want other European nations to keep getting rich off the slave trade. But then they make it seem like, oh, the British, they were trying to save the Africans from their misfortune and their misery. No, motherfucker, they were trying to stop the French and the Spanish and the Portuguese from running up that check, nigga. And also, they understood after the Haitian Revolution that if you keep importing slaves into the colonies, you're going to be greatly outnumbered, and another Haitian Revolution might pop off in another colony. That Haitian Revolution set off a lot of alarms in Europe, so they were like, listen, the French were greatly outnumbered in the French colony of Saint-Domingue, so guess what? We have to stop importing so many slaves in case they rebel against us. We're not greatly outnumbered 10 to 1, 20 to 1, and then they just cut our heads off and overthrow the entire government. It was never a case of the British or the European powers truly operating in a benevolent manner when they decided to stop the slave trade. That was to protect their own economic and political interests, as always, similar to a benevolent slave owner. That was only to protect his interests. For example, it is said that Toussaint Louverture had a benevolent slave owner, but Toussaint Louverture had an elite position on the plantation. He wasn't in the field in the goddamn sugarcane plantation. No, he was a driver. He was also a plantation manager, so he was in charge of keeping the other slaves in line. So of course, naturally, if this is the guy that you place in charge of making sure that the other slaves don't rebel against the entire operation, then yes, you're going to treat them good. Yeah, you're going to give them some special perks and privileges. Meanwhile, the other 150 slaves on the plantation are living in complete and utter misery until they drop dead. But for some reason, you want me to focus on Toussaint Louverture, who got lucky, and you want me to not acknowledge the other 200 people on the plantation that wanted to kill themselves on a daily basis. I refuse to do that. I'm not doing that. And I also want to address what he said about Napoleon's wife. Something about Napoleon's wife wasn't brutal. What do you mean, bro? She wasn't brutal. Number one, Napoleon's wife didn't even live on the colony, so how could she be brutal? The real bosses, the real big, rich, high elite French, big wigs, the billionaires that was rich off slavery, they did not live in the colonies. The people that were in the colonies, that was like the managers, right? The middlemen, and the people who was really counting up the check, they was back in Europe. They was back in France. So yes, Napoleon Bonaparte came from a slave owning family, but they weren't literally in the colony beating niggas. They weren't literally on the colony in the mix. No, they were away from that. They were far away from that. That wasn't a prestigious thing to do, to actually be in the colony under the Caribbean heat, having to deal with the Negroes on a daily basis. No, that was beneath them. But the reason why I say that it's a poor example to use is because not only was she not even there, but the reason why Napoleon decided to invade in 1802 was mainly because of his wife and her family. They were so scared of losing their fortune down in the colony, they convinced Napoleon to send that major campaign, that major military campaign, to go re-enslave the island. And Napoleon, being a weak ass dude, following the orders of his wife, he sent out that large mission and he flopped, he failed, he lost everything. So in summary, bro, if you're gonna use Napoleon Bonaparte's family as benevolent slave owners, it doesn't work, and it's historically inaccurate because Napoleon's wife and his family were the reason why that major expedition in 1802 was sent to kill everybody and enslave everybody. So that doesn't sound so benevolent to me. And Toussaint Louverture is a terrible example to use because he was He was a house nigga. He was a house nigga. Like, why you using a fucking house nigga as an example of having a benevolent slave owner, nigga? Fuck a house nigga. And that's the reason why he got locked up and he died in prison, because he had the spirit of the house nigga. House nigga spirit. That's why he got locked up. That's why his wife got tortured for months, because he was a fucking house nigga. In fact, Toussaint Louverture didn't even want to liberate the island. He wanted to set up somewhat of a Commonwealth situation where it was a tributary state under the French colonial empire. It was never going to be independent under Toussaint Louverture. That was never on his agenda. It was only until Dessalines and the field niggas, the niggas in the field, got into power and got into leadership. That is when independence became the agenda. Christophe, until his early adolescence, field nigga. Dessalines, until his early 30s, field nigga. And after Christophe served in the American Revolution, he ended up earning his freedom. So all Christophe knew was freedom, and he was a field nigga before that. And Dessalines, he was a field nigga. So they had that field nigga consciousness. They didn't have no house nigga consciousness. Even Toussaint Louverture's wife, she was in the field. And that's why when the French were torturing her for months, she didn't say a word. She never snitched, because she didn't have that house nigga consciousness in front of the white man. She didn't have that house nigga mentality in front of the white man. They tortured her for months, and she was like, nigga, I'm not saying nothing to you, bitch. But see, Toussaint Louverture, even though I respect his political acumen, I'm never gonna take that away from him, but he had a house nigga consciousness. He had a house nigga mentality. So don't give me an example of a house nigga receiving good treatment. Give me an example of what the field niggas was going through, which was the majority of the population. And if you want to know what the field niggas was going through, go to my playlist section. I have a large catalog of content. You can go listen to what the field niggas was going through. You can go learn about what really happened. Not the European narrative where they talk about how the Europeans were generous, wise, and industrious. No, learn about what really the fuck happened. And I know I might sound angry, but I'm not even angry. I just get really passionate about this topic because, you know, it's just one of my triggers. So anyways, man, listen, I don't got a problem with the brother. You know, he comments on my content a lot. I don't got no problem with him, but I just can't let that shit slide, man. I can't let that shit slide. I'm never going to make no video about no benevolent slave owner. Never going to do it. Never going to do it. Why? I already have memoirs in my playlist section of what really happened. In the memoirs of Bois Tonnerre, I don't hear nothing about no benevolent slave owner. In the memoirs of Baron de Bastille, I don't hear nothing about no benevolent slave owners. I hear stories about people getting set on fire, people getting stuffed into barrels, studded with spikes, and then thrown down a goddamn mountain. I'm hearing about 15-year-old black girls getting beat to death. So I don't know what the hell you talking about, this benevolent slave owner. I'm not talking about that shit, bro. I'm never going to cover that. It doesn't exist. It's a myth. It never happened. There was no benevolent slave owner. It never happened. And if it did happen, it was a house nigga. So fuck a house nigga, fuck a benevolent slave owner. I'm not covering it. It is what it is. It's your boy Neferkari Dessalines back in the building. Yes, indeed. Like, share, subscribe, Cash App in the description. And I'm gone. Peace.
Reincarnated, I'm back in original fashion. I left on a horse and came back in that ass, and I left with abundance and came back to famine. We used to be pyramids, now we be rapping. Look how the mighty have fallen. Used to be running, now we be walking. When you be cooning, that's when they applauded. Selling your soul, your sons and your daughter. Gotta come up in this shit, they stuck in the mix. Really, my heart it be breaking. That's why I'm stacking that paper and handle my business. Pass it down in generation. Talking about money and power and building a nation. That's a deadly combination. Never be watching the TV, they pushing agendas, falsifying information. Know they got malice intentions. Step in the room and I'm feeling the tension. Enemy watching me blocking my vision. Pay for the check cause I need my redemption. Building my kingdom, I need it protected. Ready for war like a young Money Congo. Never decided the team is the motto. Up in the crib and I'm whipping up waffles. Up in the crib and I'm smoking gelato. I'm chilling, I'm taking my pain and make it ambition. I'm blessed by the gods, but I ain't religious. I came for the power, they came for the bitch. They making no hourly wage, I got business. This is an art and they could never be taught. Selling my soul, I can never be bought. Play with my money, I see you in court. Run to the check and I do it for sport. Babylon falling, I go to the source. Packing my luggage and go overseas. Shorty be with me and she so elite. Shorty be chocolate, I'm calling her Hershey. Secret intelligence probably gon' murk me. Don't fuck with brands cause nigga I'm Haitian. Say the wrong shit and get smack in their faces.